So, Manoj, for those who don't know you, and that's going to be a handful of people, tell us a little bit about just your credentials and your background, so people understand that you're not just another guy off the street, but you have a.
Sure, sure. So right now my current job is I'm a clinical assistant professor at NYU Langone in New York City. I'm also a fellowship trained pediatric anesthesiologist.
Okay, and so by many accounts, you are on the front lines here of responding to the coronavirus in New York. How are things going right now in your world? What are you seeing? Give us a little bit of a update from the in the trenches where you're at.
Well, I'll say this right now. So right now, things haven't gotten to the point of where our resources are overwhelmed, but there's definitively a fear that that is going to be coming sooner rather than later. There's obviously massive shortages in terms of general resources, masks, protective gear, all the things that we need to be able to protect ourselves as well as other patients. So that's a little bit frustrating. We're at the point of where we're conserving to the point of where we're reusing masks and sterilizing what we have, just so that we don't run out of our resources sooner rather than later.
Right.
Currently, like pretty much every hospital in New York has COVID-19 positive patients. I can speak on NYU that we definitely do have COVID positive patients. They're currently being treated within our medical ICU setting. But the other ICUs are getting prepped for it. And we'll see kind of what happens on that front. But every day there's more people that we suspect have coronavirus and are having significant symptoms that could lead to admission.
Okay. All right. So for those that are still getting up to speed with this whole thing, we let's start with what we know on a basic level. Coronavirus is a family of viruses, most of which we've already experienced. Correct? I mean, this has been something that we just haven't experienced this threat of it, or is this a whole new thing?
This falls within the family of coronaviruses, but this virus itself is a novel virus.
Okay.
It's never been seen before, and part of the concern is that anytime you have a new virus and your body is getting exposed to it, you've never developed any prior immunity to this particular version of the virus.
Gotcha.
And so all of us, our bodies for the first time are experiencing this, and therefore that's why we may be having a little bit more severe symptoms just kind of right off the bat, or that could be just a part of this virus itself. Coronaviruses are a big family. So when we talk about the common cold is caused by a coronavirus. When we talk about like SARS and how scared we were when SARS happened, that's also another type of coronavirus. So they all fall within this family.
Just out of curiosity, what makes a family of viruses a family? Is it the structure of the virus, or is it something else?
So I mean, so typically, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big time scientist when it comes to this, but specifically with the coronavirus, if you look at it at a molecular level, it looks like a round ball with various projections coming out of it. So it actually looks like a sun, and that's why this family of viruses is nicknamed this is called a coronavirus.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, I asked my audience, my community, to submit some questions so that we could get some answers. There's so much disinformation out there, and I think that's part of what we're all battling is making sure that we're getting accurate information. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on in the first place, to have somebody that with some medical knowledge, obviously, and somebody who's on the ground level there in New York to give us some feedback. So I have a handful of questions, and I'm just going to start to rifle through some of these. If somebody does become infected, what treatments are available at the hospital, and what are they actually providing for you to treat you?
So really not. So if you're coming in and you have only mild symptoms, you're not having any like severe respiratory difficulties, not a whole lot. Right now, testing is still pretty limited. But what I would say is whether or not you were determined that you were COVID-19 positive or not, the doctors would pretty much say the exact same thing. You need to go home, you need to isolate, and rest. There's really nothing much more that can be done because with most viruses, there aren't treatments. You just kind of have to let it run its course.
So does it make sense then if somebody is feeling symptoms, does it, is there, and it's not, feeling life-threatening or anything like that, does it make sense to even go in and get tested?
I personally, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, whether or not whether you're positive or you're not positive, the answer is going to be the same. You need to quarantine, self-quarantine,
Right.
keep your distance for 2 weeks, and let the virus run its course. And then obviously, if you get more severe symptoms, if you start getting shortness of breath, those like a severe cough, shortness of breath, where you feel really that things are getting bad, 100% you should go to the ER. But to everybody else, stay at home, because right now the ERs are getting inundated with a bunch of people that are looking for this test to determine whether or not they're positive, when ultimately it doesn't matter.
It doesn't, yeah. Gotcha. That makes a ton of sense. That's what I've been talking just with other colleagues and family members. It's like, okay, you have it, great. But now what? If there's no real treatment for it, and or if the majority of the symptoms are just flu-like-ish that you can more or less weather at home, what's the point of even going? And frankly, what if you don't have it and you just have a mild cold or whatever, and then you go in and you expose yourself potentially to actually getting it?
Right.
So
Well, it goes both ways. You expose yourself and you potentially expose others if you are positive. So
right. Okay, that's clear. So the takeaway is, unless you're dealing with something that you feel is significantly affecting your ability to, to breathe, or that you feel that is an emergency, you more or less can just stay home. That makes a lot of sense in my mind. Next question: are children being hospitalized and or admitted into the ICU right now? Because there hasn't been a lot of reported deaths, but I'm wondering, this person's question, but I'm wondering if there is a bigger impact to kids than what we're being told.
from our experience, not really. We don't have any PICU patients. We don't have any pediatric ICU patients that have been admitted because of COVID. They actually seem to be pretty darn resistant to the virus. And a lot of it might have to do with the fact, first of all, like I said, there's the common cold, our coronaviruses. So, our immune systems have kind of seen versions of it. And another theory is that with kids, because their immune systems are still developing, that they may not have as robust of an immune response as, say, the rest of the population. That's another theory, nothing confirmed.
Sure.
But ultimately, it's because they're also generally amongst the healthiest of the population.
Uh-huh.
They aren't, like, when we're talking about risk factors, we're talking about, the elderly, which is 60 and above. When you look at the disaster of what's going on in Italy, about 98% of all their deaths occur in people 60 years and above.
Wow.
And you look at smokers, people with chronic illness, whether that's high blood pressure, heart disease, they have bad respiratory issues, lung disease, diabetes, the obese, are just amongst a number of the risk factors that are associated with more severe presentation of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine that with young people, that generally speaking, that's not an issue.
Gotcha. As a single parent, if you feel that you've contracted it and you've exposed your children to it, again, is that something where, I'm just thinking through logistically on a practical level.
Sure.
Let's say a parent gets it and they're in bed, they've got flu-like symptoms, they've got younger kids at home. Do you send your kids to someone else? Do you bring somebody else in? Do you have any practical advice on that?
Are we talking about like dual parent households, single parent households?
Single parent.
Okay. So what I would say with single parent households is you spend a lot of time, like people who are single parents spend a lot of time with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not your kids are symptomatic, if you've been spending a lot of time time with them, and like most parents tend to be affectionate, they share with their children, your kids probably have it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, they don't tend to have severe disease.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be pretty darn protected against it.
Okay.
So it's one of those things. What I would say is that a lot of these kids are asymptomatic, but you need to kind of keep them away from others, because I think there's a lot of thought that asymptomatic spread is a much bigger deal than what we've thought.
Can you define what that means?
So generally speaking, when patients are symptomatic, and if they're coughing, if they're coughing, they can release lots of virus in air droplets, etc., that other people can counteract. But even patients who have symptoms can still shed virus. They're going to shed virus in lower quantities than somebody who's actively symptomatic, but they can still pass on that disease to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and that person could then become symptomatic from it. So that is currently probably a bigger issue than we realize.
Yeah, that to me is one of the biggest takeaways, because I think so many people think, oh, I'm not elderly, I'm in pretty good shape, I'm not going to get it, I'm going to go about my day, and we don't really take into account that we're all carriers of this thing, even healthy individuals, and that we potentially could be spreading it to others, who then spread it to others, who eventually pass it on to people who are vulnerable to it. It really is kind of saving lives by staying put and reducing social interaction, even if you are younger, healthy, and not really prone to getting this disease.
Right, but this is right now a huge issue, right? Because right now there are throngs of people, of young people, like in Clearwater Beach in Florida, that are packing beaches.
Right.
And and Mayor de Blasio in New York, mandated that all restaurants and bars close as of today at 9 a.m. Because they want to prevent spread. Because as of this weekend, a lot of the bars were still pretty packed full of people.
Yeah, that's wild.
And when you're talking about New York and Washington essentially going back and forth as the two primary hubs of the COVID spread, it's pretty disheartening.
Yeah. I mean, there's lessons that we can be learning out of Italy. And I mean, I've been reading reports from people saying, hey, we didn't take this seriously and we're paying the price. Please take this seriously. And one of the most important messages that they continue to be putting out is reduce social interaction. So, you had mentioned flattening the curve on your recent Facebook post. And I'd love, for those who don't understand or haven't heard that term just yet, can you please explain what that is? Because that really is, I think, life-saving information.
Right. So essentially what flattening the curve means is that you don't overwhelm the hospital systems with a huge number of new cases all at once. So if you don't practice social distancing, which is defined as keeping about 6 feet away, 5 to 6 feet away from another person, because when you cough, they estimate that the distance the virus can travel is about 6 feet. So hence the idea of social distancing, and practicing proper hygiene, washing your hands, pretty consistently, sanitizing. And so what that does is that when you do that, you have less affected patients in any given amount of time. So if you practice it, it's not that it states that you're not going to get new cases, but the number of cases that are hitting the hospital system at once isn't a huge number. Mm-hmm. So that you're not overwhelming the resources of the hospital at any given moment in time. They always have enough resources to deal with the influx of patients that they have. But if you don't practice social distancing, if you don't practice good hygiene, then what ends up happening is you get a huge number of people all at once that get sick. They all come to the hospital, and now the hospital doesn't have enough resources to deal with everybody who is sick. And unfortunately, that's what's happening in Italy. In Italy, they are massively triaging, and they essentially are saying we don't have enough ventilators And so they are picking and choosing who is living and dying because they don't have a choice.
Yeah, that's tragedy beyond proportions right now that hopefully we're not going to have to deal with. Hopefully we've been proactive enough to mitigate this thing to the point where the curve has been flattened enough so that you guys can do your job and people are not having to die because they don't have what they need.
I'll be honest, Peter, though, there's a lot of worry that we are not doing enough.
I mean, this is something that will, if I understand the timeline correctly, from the moment one gets infected to a point of, hey, I need some help, it's a 1 to 2 week period. Is that correct?
The incubation period for this virus is anywhere from 2 to 14 days. Average time about 5 days. It could obviously 2 to 14 is a general range. You're probably going to have outliers. But five days tends to be the average incubation period. Most common symptoms kind of mimic the flu, like I said, but they can be a little bit more severe. It's generally cough, dry persistent cough with fever. And we define fever as 100.4 and above. A lot of these patients also end up getting lethargic. They have muscle aches. But the coughing, shortness of breath, fever, those tend to be kind of signs that potentially you could have it. And, it's one of those things where if you have severe shortness of breath, then that's something where that's when the hospitals are going to generally get overwhelmed at that point.
Mm-hmm. How concerned are you personally that might be the reality?
I'll be honest with you. I was pretty skeptical as of probably a week and a half ago. And now you just see the numbers and the fact that it's becoming more and more real on a day-to-day basis. I'm definitely concerned. I think that the U.S.'s response has been pretty slow. It's pretty disappointing overall. But hopefully, all we can do is just where we're at is prepare the best that we can prepare, and see what goes on. I mean, one thing I'll say about New York, there's a lot of older people that live in New York, but there's also a lot of really young people. And so what I'm hoping is that because our demographic is very different than, say, Italy, that has a large percentage of people that are elderly. And I'm hoping it doesn't get to that point because the demographic spread is different here.
Right. When you say that you're more concerned, is that people coming in saying, hey, I want to get tested, or people coming in saying, I'm having shortness of breath, I need immediate help?
Well, so I'm not seeing, so the emergency physicians are the ones that are on the front line of seeing those initial COVID patients. But for us, because we're taking care of patients in the operating room, a number of these patients are in the ICU. We have ICU colleagues. Anesthesia invented the field of critical care. And so I have a number of anesthesia colleagues that are also critical care physicians who've been pretty much keeping our entire department updated and have been kind of on the forefront of developing methods to keep us as safe as possible, should we need to do any kind of surgeries or procedures on COVID positive patients.
This is a good question. What is the most effective way during the incubation period to determine if you have contracted the virus? So I've read reports where you can hold your breath for 10 seconds to see if you can. No, you're shaking your head. No. What is that, a falsity, or what's the?
It's all fallacy. It's all fallacy, man.
Okay.
I mean, this is exactly the idea of like this misinformation that's being spread all over social media. I saw something recently that said that I tried to scientifically state why being in a sauna can protect you against the coronavirus. It's all nonsense.
Right. So sitting on the beach with your feet up, drinking a pina colada is not going to help. I mean, that's the report I read.
I read, one of my buddies sent me a thing that said that that alcohol reduces your risk of contracting coronavirus and specifically tequila, and that's not real.
Oh, not the. Oh, I thought you were going to say Corona, a bottle of Corona, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. Oh, I can take a wild guess who that friend might be.
You will 100% know who it is.
Yeah. Yeah, any excuse to have a drink of tequila. So is there any home self tests that you can do, or are we just looking for symptoms at this point?
It's all symptom based, and like I said, and I've told a number of my friends who've experienced mild symptoms. Remember, we're still in cold and flu season. So the thing is that the cold and flu are still very real and people are still contracting them. So, but amongst the COVID fear, anyone who might be having just a bad cold or the flu is worried that they have COVID. But what I would say is the care is the exact same. Lots of fluids, make sure you're eating right, lots of vitamin C, zinc, whatever you need in terms of feeling better, and sleep. Fluid and sleep are probably the two most important things. A lot of people don't realize how dehydrated they get when they're ill, especially with an elevated fever, that you really need to make sure that you keep hydrated. And that's really going to be the thing that's going to help you the most. And if you have a fever and you feel crummy, take some Tylenol. There's reports that maybe we should avoid any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug like ibuprofen, naproxen, Aleve, that it might actually be detrimental to us, to our immune system to do that. But then you also have patients that, in the most severe end up presenting, it's just questionable about what it is. So the general stance is if you have a fever and you have body aches, take Tylenol and maybe avoid NSAIDs.
I read a report from a young woman who her physical condition was such that she had dealt with a lot of viruses. She was maybe more susceptible to them or something like that. And her advice, which was really beautiful, was to allow the pain in your body in those, in terms of like a fever or things like that, is actually your body working. It's actually your body doing what it can to create a hostile environment for the virus and kill it off, and allowing your body to do what it does. So we often think of fever and things of those things as the enemy, when really it's, if we sort of embrace it, it's our body doing what it needs to do to fight back against this hostile, invader, basically.
You're 100% right. I mean, our bodies are doing it because our body thinks this is the best way to fight what we have. And you're absolutely right about creating a hostile environment in which it makes it difficult for viruses or bacteria to live. However, the thing is that the most extreme reactions to that immune response can lead to why people are getting admitted into the ICUs. So it's a delicate balance. And not feeling great is also not a great thing.
Sure.
And so you're absolutely right. It is your body fighting against it, but at the same time, some of these responses can also be maladaptive.
Sure.
So it's a matter of finding that balance.
Yep. Next question. If you're required to be in public, what are some of the important measures to take in order to prevent contracting the virus?
Like I said, practice social distancing. Keep yourself about 6 feet away from others. Practice good hygiene. Really basic stuff. If you're in a big open air environment, wearing a mask doesn't help. If you're actively sick, that person should be wearing a mask. They should avoid you should avoid crowded spaces. And that's pretty much it. If you do that, you'll dramatically decrease the number of exposures.
How accurate, I don't know if you can answer this, but how accurate are the numbers we've been seeing regarding the total cases versus deaths?
So, I think it's accurate in terms of confirmed cases. but that's the big thing, right? It's
Big
confirmed.
asterisk, yeah.
There's COVID positive patients. So what I would say is that my personal feeling is that the death rate is much lower, because there's a lot of people, like I said, who may have very mild symptoms. They may be COVID positive, but the focus shouldn't be on testing whether or not they're positive or not, because they're mild, and it's a waste of resources.
Mm-hmm.
But if you imagine that there's probably a number of people that have very, very mild disease, that denominator of total cases should be going up versus deaths. So when that happens, the percentage of deaths should become lower.
Mm-hmm.
The cases that we're seeing are the ones that are so sick, they're the ones that are coming to the hospital. But in the general population, I guarantee it's much, much, much higher.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that for me, I actually take solace in that.
Yeah.
In that, yeah, this is not a joke. This is definitively more severe than the flu. But I don't also want people to think that doomsday is coming.
Right. Right. I mean, there's, just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, some people are saying that this is potentially a dress rehearsal for something down the road, and that this is, potentially a really good wake-up call for us to take these things seriously, to take measures to prepare on an individual basis, but what are we doing on a systemic level, governmental level, to prepare for something like this, especially in a country as big as America is. There, like you said, it's probably, it might be too little too late for some of this stuff. We probably could have taken preventative measures a week, 2, or maybe a month before, once we heard things were breaking out across the other side of the globe. So, God forbid it is an issue, but hopefully a very small and minor one, but enough of a one to maybe give us a wake up call, and so that we can think about how do we do that, how do we take care of this in the future.
I think I think you're 100% right, but I do think that overall our initial response was very poor.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping.
Sorry, finish that thought, and I have a question.
No, so so I'm hoping that that things don't get bad, but right now, when you look at the number of cases in the U.S. versus Italy, we mimic the numbers pretty similarly. On a day-to-day basis. The number of confirmed cases matches eerily to Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, Italy is still, so what's happening is we need to somehow break that momentum, because it's this hyperbolic increase. So a few cases becomes a lot more cases, which becomes a whole lot more cases.
Right.
And that's the trajectory that things look at this moment.
That's that's concerning. What should we have done differently in your mind?
I mean, just the full response by the government in terms of, accepting outside help, having these kits available, enacting strict measures in terms of limiting exposure in big group settings, would have been a huge thing. The way that we've kind of failed with what's happening with people that have been traveling, people waiting for hours and hours and hours in line trying to get through immigration, customs, when now you're talking about people that are coming from countries where there's been a lot of infected, and now you're piling them into small rooms by the hundreds, and then having them come out into the community, and depending that every single one of them is going to self-quarantine. Those are just a few examples. I mean, even, I'll say that even, a lot of physicians have expressed frustration in their own institutions by what they feel has been a lackluster response in terms of really minimizing unnecessary cases, conserving resources for when this wave potentially could hit.
Right. How long after you get well can you still spread it?
Well, I think what the idea is that once you're symptomatic, that if you quarantine for about a full 2 weeks, uh, you should the risk of you spreading infection then at that point is pretty low.
Okay. Um, is it possible that, so we have this sort of bell curve. Is it possible that, like, at what point are we going to be able to go back out and live our lives on a normal daily basis? Because if one person hasn't, doesn't it kind of re-kick the whole thing off again?
Well, what happens is, I mean, this is what a lot of the thought is, that we actually build up an immunity to the virus.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who got sick or could be asymptomatic, mild symptoms, moderate symptoms, once they get well, the hope is that your immune system actually now will recognize the virus, and should you get it again, your immune system will be able to fight it. That's the whole idea behind trying to develop a vaccine for this particular virus. Is that if we're able to train our immune system to recognize it, then the degree of symptoms should be minimized.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of unknowns, because this happened it happened in the end of December is when it first started happening in China, which is talking about the heart of flu season. And a lot of these viruses, these coronaviruses, do really, really well in the cold. But a lot of them don't do all that great when the weather starts warming up. But we have no idea how this virus is going to react.
Mm-hmm.
So some people are like, oh, once the weather warms up, it won't be a thing anymore. But we don't know it. We don't know if this is going to be kind of a one-off, that it happened, we get through it, and then it really isn't a thing anymore. We don't know if it's going to be seasonal, and it could be potentially the new flu, or if it's going to be a year-long threat. And then at that point, then you've got to just, like I said, kind of evaluate and just kind of see how things go.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, we'll build up some immunity and prevent it from becoming this severe again.
If somebody was to cough on a surface, how long does the virus remain infectionable, if you will, by somebody else touching it?
Says the best estimate that I've seen is about 3 days.
Okay. Let's see. Some of these questions you've already answered. Someone who wrote in is almost positive that they have it. What are some ways of knowing that you're getting better or worse? Because for this person, it kind of came in waves. They'd get better, then they'd feel a little bit worse. Is there any way to know that or not?
Like I said, if a lot of times with these diseases, there are ups and downs in terms of the getting better process. But feeling crummy and just like lack of energy isn't a reason to go to the ER. What I would say is that you feel like you're having, if you start feeling like you're having shortness of breath, like it's feeling like it's getting harder to breathe for you, then I think that would be when I would start seeking treatment.
Mm-hmm.
That ends up being, because the virus itself binds to receptors within the lung. And it's that response after the binding that leads to the most severe disease, and hence why coughing, shortness, why you get the cough, and also why you can get very short of breath. So as long as the person is breathing okay and they just feel crummy, I say just wait it out.
Mm-hmm. If everyone were to stay home, this is a hypothetical, but if everyone were to stay home and businesses closed down, what's the estimated timeline in your mind for this thing to pass through?
I mean, if you're talking about a perfect world,
Yeah.
Honestly, probably if that truly happened, it'd probably just be a matter of weeks.
Yeah. But being that that's not happening, and we've got our party goers down in Cocoa Beach or wherever the heck else down in Florida, and everybody else in between, I'm estimating, this is just obviously my personal guess, but this is going to be, because there's going to be a wave, right? And some people are going to contract it earlier, some people are going to get it later, factoring in a couple of weeks each time for them to process the illness. I mean, I think the shortest we're going to be looking at is a month, right? And then, probably to be safe, you're looking at another couple of weeks to maybe even a month after that. I mean, I've been telling my kids to prepare for probably no more school, this year.
Yeah.
Get used to e-learning, and I mean,
Yeah.
it's a new world, and we're gonna have to adapt.
I mean, that's what I said. I would say most conservative estimate probably a couple of months.
Mm,
And and like I said, there's just so many unknowns about what'll happen once the weather warms up.
mm,
And what is going to be, are we instituting full measures to try to minimize spread? And like I said, a lot of it just comes down to individuals. Like we've got to kind of work all together. And I'll tell you this, I mean, like I said, I was skeptical, and I also was like, I'm young, I'm healthy, if I get it, whatever.
mm-hmm,
But I fear for my mom.
mm-hmm,
My mom is 65.
mm-hmm,
I fear for my sister, who has ulcerative colitis, pretty severe, and she's on immunosuppressant drugs to keep her under control. So they're both at very high risk of getting severe disease from this.
mm-hmm.
And once you start personalizing it, and you realize that this isn't a joke, you could lose your loved ones over this. It's pretty scary, and it's not that like the flu can't inflict these people as well. So I think there's also this thought that it's just a bad flu, but it seems that the response to this is even more severe. So than what you would normally get with the flu. So I would just say, kind of just take precautions, and we'll see how things go.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any natural cures or preventions that you're aware of, or that they're testing, or that they think might be heading in the right direction to prevent this? Or
Honestly, man, just like
right.
most diseases, like I said, good hygiene, and
Yeah.
keep away from people that are sick, potentially sick, um, etc. So, and keep yourself away even if you feel well, because of the fact that you could be an asymptomatic spreader.
Mm-hmm.
Just got to just take care of yourself the best you can. Like I said, smokers are at higher risk, so maybe quit smoking. It's just like anything. It's just people that have chronic illnesses, So, the healthier you are, the better shot you have at fighting this virus.
I've got a handful more of just some practical questions, and then we can kind of wrap it up. If you're at home, if you believe that you've contracted it and you're cooking something, um, or just drinking out of the same glass as like your kids would, is that something you'd advise against? I mean, I'm hearing the answer as I'm saying it to you. But are there anything that we can do to help, eliminate or minimize the impact, even just within our own homes? I mean, the likelihood, I guess, is that it's probably going to be contracted by anybody in the home, but
Yeah, I mean, obviously, don't share cups. Don't share cups. If you're sick, then listen. I mean, you've got to take care of your kids. But what I would say is just continue to minimize the amount of exposure that you give to your kids. Like, if your normal thing is, hey, I love kissing my kids, don't kiss your kids. Don't share from the same glass. Make sure that you teach them how to wash their hands, cough into their elbow, to minimize the spread.
Mm-hmm.
Even doing all of this stuff, you may all still get it. It's very likely that you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think teaching these habits early on can, in the long term, be really, really beneficial.
Yep. A lot of restaurants are staying open for just takeout or drive-through. Do you see an increased risk in ordering food in that manner? if we're self-quarantine and we're in our cars, we're not really interacting with people, we pick up something at a drive-through or at a, you know, is there in the restaurant industry, like how probable is it that one person can create, a contagious spread because of the handling of the food or things of that nature, or is it relatively safe? Do we know?
I don't think that you can really determine what those exact numbers are. I think, again, just like anything, you've got to put trust in the people that are making your food, that hopefully they're practicing proper hygiene. And if somebody hands you a bag, then hand on the bag, don't touch your face, don't do anything. But when you get home, take out, wash your hands, throw away the bag, sanitize, just make sure you're taking precautions. Things could get spread through just the handling of like the bags itself. But generally speaking, I think you're probably still okay. I don't think that the risk of contracting COVID from mishandled food would be that great.
Okay. I was going to ask you the same thing about Amazon packages. I know a lot of people are sitting at home ordering online and having things delivered. So same kind of common sense measures yeah. Very good, Manoj. This has been super, super helpful. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Is there information that what's the question that's not being asked that we need to know? Or is it just a measure of common sense at this point in reducing social interaction? What we know is basically just, continue to use that common sense.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's hard. We're social creatures.
Yeah.
And the idea of telling us, hey, I'm supposed to minimize my interactions with others, stay at home. Just these kinds of things are really difficult for us to do.
It's wild. It really is.
And I get it. Believe me, I get it. I am a social creature.
Yes, you are.
And
I follow your Instagram.
And there's times where I'm almost I feel fortunate. It's kind of messed up, but I feel fortunate that I work in a hospital with a lot of great people, because even though I come home and I'm essentially just staying at home, I get to go to work and work with like incredible number of people who I still get to socially interact with, because we all have a common goal.
Mm-hmm.
And so even throughout all of this, I feel kind of lucky. Other people might be like, hey, dude, you go to the hospital, you deal with these patients to get your social fix, and I'm happy to just stay at home. But hey, I am getting my social fix. So I don't feel as crazy as I feel like some people are feeling right now, just being at home, especially from my friends who have little kids.
Yeah.
Who they're saying it is the most challenging thing because their kids are literally losing their minds.
Yeah, that might be the biggest challenge, that and the economic impact that we're probably going to see from this. But
yeah.
One last question. What can we do to help you and the other people on the front lines of this? Is there anything that we can do to make this a little bit more bearable?
I'd say a few things. One, like I said, if you have mild symptoms, don't go to the ER. Don't overwhelm the hospital system. Stay at home, take care of yourself, minimize your interactions. Good hygiene. Second thing I would say is to stop hoarding and buying tons of toilet paper or medicines or whatever else you're doing, because there's a lot of people who actually need these things and are not able to get it.
Mm.
And we're not doing the community a service by doing so. I'll be honest, I haven't bought any food. I have a standard amount of toilet paper. And I think just practicing common sense and not letting panic be the thing that dictates your actions would help people a lot. if you have masks, again, those masks generally don't help unless you're sick. And what it's doing is that it's actually it's creating shortages for the healthcare professionals that actually need to use them. Especially your N95 respirator masks that people are buying. There's been an incredible movement. Like, there's been a lot of manufacturers, I don't know if you saw this, but Youre stopped making perfume, and now they're just making hand sanitizer, and they're giving it for free. And a lot of other companies, distilleries are doing that. Beer distilleries are doing that as well, where they're actually utilizing the alcohol that they produce to make hand sanitizer. So that's what I would say is just, the resources that the medical professionals need, please, please, please stop buying them. Let us have them. And just do right to your community. Everyone is scared for themselves, but this isn't about yourself. This is about everybody else.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice, man. It's times like these that I'm always so impressed with the human spirit. And, we saw this during 9/11. Everybody's talking about how there was so much evil, but at the same time, there was so much, there was people running into the buildings and to save. And we saw the best of humanity. And I like to look for those in moments like this, and you being one of those people on the front lines, it's just my heartfelt love to you and the rest of the first responders in this crisis goes out to you guys, and your advice is very well stated, and maybe we can do a follow-up call if you're not too inundated, but let's hope that that's not the case. And my love to you and your family, as well as your colleagues.
Same to you, Peter, and your family as well.
Very good. Thanks, Manoj.
Thanks, buddy.